that's where we go back to the 3 fundamentals of overcoming your fear of flying. You've got to educate yourself about fear and the psychology of fear of flying, and you got to educate yourself about something about airplanes. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here. We're going to talk about your issues. You're going to do most of the talking from here on out, and then we're going to move over to the airplane, and we're going to talk about some things you can do on the airplane and some other issues. So you're going to get to spend the rest of the night working on it. Okay. There's 2 types of triggers. There's 2 pathways to anxiety. There are, Sue said you only have half a brain, so she gave me the other half here. So anyway, so the brain, okay. So this is the prefrontal cortex, is this part of the brain up there. That's one source of anxiety. That's a very sophisticated part of the brain, and it does a lot of things. It makes decisions. It conjures up the what ifs for you, okay? And so that's one pathway to anxiety. So you have a thought, I wonder if this thing could fly. I wonder what that noise was. I wonder what that feeling was, all right? And then it sends a signal to the amygdala, which is actually missing down here, but it's a little almond-shaped, almond-sized part of the brain. It means, in Greek, it means almond, okay? And we have 2 of them. It really should be amygdalae, but we just call it the singular amygdala, all right? And why do you think we have 2 of them? Must be pretty important. And it does a lot, yeah, we want to back up because it does a lot of things, but the primary thing it does is it captures emotional memories. It's not like a video, it's not like an audio, it's like a really complex system that if if you're assaulted in a dark alley, it will remember that. And with a strong bias. That's where we get all of our negative biases from, right? Because we got more of those because the brain is always trying to make sure that we survive, primarily that the brain survives, okay? So one pathway for anxiety is you have a thought, and then it goes to the amygdala, and the amygdala initiates the survival instinct, the fight or flight response. And once it gets initiated, it's all biological from that point on. It starts producing cortisol. What's cortisol? It's a chemical that basically amps up the sugar in your bloodstream. It's getting you ready to fight, to flee, or to freeze, which is another response we don't talk about all that much. Okay? The other one is the amygdala response. Okay? The amygdala pathway. You don't have to think for the amygdala to get fired up. If you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden, out of the corner of your eye, you see something down there, and even though it turns out to be a stick, in that instant, your brain perceived it as a possible snake. That's one of the natural fears that we have. You will react and jump away before you can send a signal from your cortex to the amygdala. And because this part of the brain evolved first, the amygdala down in here, the preference in the brain is in favor of the amygdala. For my senses, if I feel pain or any sensory input, it's a shorter neuron pathway from the senses to the amygdala than it is from the senses to the cortex up here. Okay? And that's all we'll basically talk about. But you're at a disadvantage because you're a human being. And then some of you, like Eric pointed out, are brighter than the average bear. All right? You're too damn smart. We need to dumb you down a little bit because you can't shut down that analytical process up here. And that's why you're so gifted at thinking of what if and filling in the blanks down there. Okay? So the 2 pathways are from the cortex and from the amygdala. And the 2 types of triggers are mechanical and emotional. We've talked about that. How many of you here have a primary fear of something going wrong on the airplane? Everything from the pilot to the airport, all that, okay? So raise your hands up there and get a feel for it, okay? How many of you are worried more about the emotional side? My own airworthiness, okay? Yeah, and they're pretty balanced. Like I said, years ago it was more mechanical than it was emotional, but now it's pretty much evened out there. And again, both of you, it sucks to have a fear of flying because you both end up in the same place. Anxious, can't concentrate. And one of the disadvantages when the biology kicks in and you start producing cortisol, it actually clouds your thinking. So now you are not as capable of creating a solution and resolving the dilemma as you were before the cortisol starts pumping. Cortisol was designed for short bursts of energy to get us out of the threat. The threats are gone by and large, but the system is still intact. And now we're actually aggravating it in many cases by our reference to our cell phones. It's really keeping us wired. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to whip through this. Okay, little voices. How many of you hear things? Who's going to raise their hand to that, right? Yeah, all right. So who's doing the talking? When you get on the airplane, who's doing the talking?
Not me.
No. Yeah, it's a part of it. Yeah, I think I kind of think of it as the survival instinct in us is doing the talking, and it's saying, really, yeah, I thought we had this deal. We weren't going to do this thing on airplanes, right? Yeah, it's that little voice in there, and so that's what we talk about. You know, trying to turn that little voice around, and kind of treat it like a child, and comfort it and all that, instead of yelling at it and saying, get out of here and you know, leave me alone. All right. So, what does it say to you when it speaks? What's it say?
It's usually more rational.
More rational? So yours is pretty calm. What's a rational thing that your little voice says?
It just depends on the situation. I mean, I haven't been on a plane in a while, so I don't really remember anything. So, but if I'm thinking irrationally and I'm about to make an irrational decision,
Okay.
usually I have a semi-argument where it's like, do this rational thing or do this irrational thing to, like, for short-term benefits.
Cool. You need to teach the class because that's the right answer. That's what we want. We want to be able to step back and come up with a rational situation. Most of the time, though, we have to have some more education in order to come up with a answer. Yeah.
Mine just says you don't have to do this. You can go home.
Right. Okay. But why is it saying you can go home? What, you don't have to do this, which is true.
Because it's just fear-driven. I just don't want to be uncomfortable for that long.
Yeah, because you're uncomfortable, and yeah. So it is kind of problematic. So these are the things that we need to do to deal with triggers. We need to recognize the trigger, regulate the trigger, and then replace the trigger with something else. And so we're going to do an activity here. Let's see. No, we're going to do the triggering thing first. Okay. So what we need is everybody's got some little sticky notes, right? So what I want you to do, I want you to write down one trigger per sticky note, as many as you need, and we'll give you more sticky notes if you need them.
We'll save you guys. We'll save some trees right now. You don't need to write down turbulence. I saw the show of hands. And we'll talk about different types of turbulence and why they occur, and the meteorological conditions of when they arise. It always is one common factor. It's when the pilots want to eat. That's when all the trouble starts. But I saw the hands go up, so we're going to talk about that. So you don't need to write down turbulence, but if anything else is bothering you, write those down. We'll make some groups and talk about it.
All right?
We'll talk about turbulence.
So anybody confused about what to do? So write down as many as you can and just hold on to them. We're going to pick them up here in a little bit. So take a couple of minutes and just write down as many triggers, closing the door. That would be one.
I only got one.
Okay, all right, that's cool. Piece of cake.